Hello students, welcome to Enthusiast. In my last video, I had discussed items of inclusion or non-inclusion in the domestic income of India. In this video, I am going to discuss the items of inclusion and non-inclusion in the national income of India. So students, if we recall, when we had identified certain items to be included in the domestic income of India, we had identified two factors. The first one, income should be generated only within the domestic territory of a country, and second, we have to include the income which is generated both by the residents as well as the non-residents. When both these conditions are satisfied, a given item or a given income is included in the calculation of. Similarly, while calculating the national income of a country, rules have to be taken into consideration, and there are two rules that need to be taken into consideration. Rule number one, that the income should be generated only by the residents of a country, and second, the income which is generated within the domestic territory will be included, and along with that, whatever income is earned by the normal residents of a country from abroad, that will also be taken into consideration. So students, if you remember the equation when we say that national income NNPFC is equal to NDPFC, which is domestic income, plus NFIA. So from this equation itself, it is very clear that national income includes the income which is generated within the domestic territory, and it also includes the income which is earned by the residents of a country from abroad. So let us take a few examples and discuss this concept. So students, focus on statement number one, purchase of eatables by a firm. Now, in this statement, the eatables are being purchased by a firm. So this could mean two things. Either the firm is purchasing these eatables for the purpose of further production as a raw material, or the firm may have purchased these eatables for the purpose of resale. So when any particular good is purchased either for the purpose of production as a raw material or for the purpose of resale are termed as intermediate goods, and any expenditure incurred on intermediate goods means intermediate expenditure. And by the concept of national income, we know that only the final expenditure is taken into consideration. Intermediate expenditure is not taken into consideration. Therefore, purchase of eatables by a firm will not be included in the calculation of national income. And why? Because it is an intermediate expenditure of the firm. If it was a final expenditure, we would have definitely included it. But since it is an intermediate expenditure of the firm, we will not be including the purchase of such eatables which have been purchased by the firms. Second, interest received by individuals on their deposits with bank. Now, if you refer to the income method of calculating domestic income, NDPFC, we know that interest is a component of operating surplus. But now the question arises, is any type of interest included in the calculation of national income? So here students, we need to be careful that all types of interest or any interest is not included in the calculation of national income. So we have to check whether a given interest in the statement relates to a productive interest or does it relate to an unproductive interest? So in this statement, interest is being received by the individuals on their deposits with banks. So which would mean that banks is going to utilize the deposits of the individuals for the purpose of lending, and here we are assuming that the lending would be done by the banks for productive purpose to the firms, and that is why such an interest which the individuals receive on their deposits with the bank is included in the national income. Interest received by individuals on their deposits with bank is included in the national income. And why it is included? Because the bank utilizes this amount for productive purpose. When banks accept the deposits, it is going to use these deposits for lending, and more precisely lending for production purpose. That is why such an interest which is received by the individuals on their deposits with bank will be included in the national income. Now statement number 3 says, again it is related to interest, but let's see whether it will be included in the national income or not. Interest paid by an individual on loan taken to buy a motorcycle. Now this particular individual has taken loan from the bank and he is utilizing this loan for buying a motorcycle. So this relates to the consumption expenditure of the individual. Taking a loan to buy a motorcycle indicates the consumption expenditure of the individual, and therefore such an interest which is paid on loan, which is taken for consumption purpose, is not included in the calculation of national income. In statement number 2, interest received on the deposits, why was it included? Because the loan amount was utilized for productive purpose. But in statement number 3, why are we not including this interest in the calculation of national income? Because the loan amount which is utilized by the individual relates to consumption and not to production. So always remember students, any consumption loan is not included. Only productive interest, productive loans are included in the calculation of national income. Statement number 4 says contribution to the provident fund by the employer. So by this statement, students, you can identify that this is an item of compensation of employees when we calculate national income using the income method, and more specifically contribution to provident fund by the employer is an item under the component social security contribution by the employers. So since social security contribution in the form of provident fund, let's say, comes under COE, and COE is an important component of domestic income, so therefore any contribution which is made by the employer is included in the calculation of national income. Now if the statement would have been like contribution to the provident fund by the employee instead of employer, then students, in such a case you should always remember that any contribution which is made by the employee will not be included in the calculation of national income. Only the contributions which are made by the employer to the employee is included in the calculation of national income. Value of interest foregone on loans provided by an employer to employee. So here you can see that benefit has been received by the employee and it has been provided by the employer. So definitely such a benefit will be included in the national income. And students, if you try to identify the specific component, which one of the component are you going to adjust this value of interest foregone? So this is a component under the COE, COE has three components: wages and salaries in cash, wages and salaries in kind, and social security contribution by the employers. So according to the statement, value of interest foregone on loans provided by an employer to employee is a part of COE in kind, and therefore it will be included in the calculation of national income. Compensation of employees in kind, and therefore it is included in the calculation of national income. Let's examine the next one. Expenditure incurred by the government on providing free education. By providing educational facility, government is promoting welfare, but we as individuals may be receiving it for free, but it is an expenditure which is being borne by the government. And where such a kind of expenditure would be recorded? So by the expenditure method of national income, we know that such an expenditure by the government is recorded under the government final consumption expenditure. The next statement, purchase of stationery by a school for office use. Now whenever the stationery is purchased by a school for office use, then what happens to the stationery? The stationery obviously has a limited life, and the stationery will be subsequently used up by provision of administrative services by the school. So the stationery which has been purchased, since it is going to get used up in the provision of administrative services, such a purchase of stationery will be treated as an intermediate expenditure, and therefore it will not be included in the calculation of national income. Statement number 10 says, payment of corporation tax to the government. As a rule, students, please remember that if a statement is focusing on payment of any type of tax, corporation tax by nature we know that it is a direct tax, but payment of any tax to the government, whether it is a direct tax or an indirect tax, should be treated as a transfer payment to the government, and hence it should not be included in the national income. So students, I have also included many more statements. So if you want to practice those statements, please log on to the website www.educias.com, and you will have a wide variety of statements that we have covered for practice. Thank you so much.